Welcome back to the Franchisors.com Summer Franchise Tour. Thanks again for joining us. Today, we have two wonderful guests from RentACenter. We have EVP of Franchising, Cathy Skula, and we also have the VP of Franchise Development, Michael Landry, joining us today. Hello, guys. Thanks for coming.
Hello. Hey, thanks for
Thank you for having us in your wonderful office. So today we are coming to you live from the boardroom of RentACenter here. So probably a lot of crazy fights and crazy arguments have happened in here. So hopefully we're going to be doing some fun stuff here today, and really looking forward to having you guys on. Main goal of today, as you guys have listened to before, is that we really wanted to have people like Michael and Cathy on to help folks who are re-emerging and emerging in the franchise space to really understand what not to do, what mistakes not to make again. And I think that who better to ask than established folks such as Cathy and Michael to help us out with that. So without further ado, what I'd love to do is to first dive into team and talent, guys. And I know that since you guys are publicly traded, that your days have that the early days are a little bit longer time ago than most. But would love to kind of dive into. I know, Cathy, that when you came on board here, that there were likely a lot of changes that you wanted to make because you were taking your subsidiary into the next level. And so, would love to kind of hear what were the first things that you thought of when you were getting organized here.
Yeah, great. Great question. So when we first came into the picture, when I first took the role of overseeing the franchise subsidiary, we weren't offering RentACenter franchises at all at the time. Mm-hmm. We actually were only offering them under the Color Time brand, which is a brand that the company had owned for many years, had been a tiny franchise subsidiary of a large multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, and really sort of existed in isolation in a little bit of a bubble, and took on the challenge and started assessing the talent on the staff, because there had been some long tenured folks on the staff that probably are what got us to that point where we were, but weren't necessarily going to get us to the future the way I envisioned it. And really just did a quick assessment of the talent and talked to people and really weighed that out against what I thought the future held, and made some changes. And looking back on it now, you always want to think, I gave somebody more time than I probably should have rather than less, but made some changes that pretty quickly and pointed the ship in the right direction. But one of the first changes I made was to hire Michael Landry as the VP of Franchise Development, and that worked out very well. Almost 8 years later, we're still here working in essentially the same roles.
Absolutely.
And the changes we both made together early on proved so successul that not only did the company feel good about the way the Color Time franchise subsidiary was going, but about 2 years later, we convinced the company to begin offering franchises under the RentACenter brand, the flagship brand, and that's the only brand we offer in that space today.
Yeah, so my follow-up to that is, why did you feel so strongly about, obviously Michael is a very wonderful candidate for that job, but I guess my question to you is why did you feel so strongly about franchise development being the first thing, one of the very first things that you wanted to do when you came on board?
Yeah, so we had sort of a stagnating brand at the time. We were sitting at about the same number of locations for a long time. The franchisees wanted to see more growth. We weren't really bringing in anybody new to the system. We had some limited growth with the folks that we had in the system, but everyone had been in the roles for so long that we really needed a fresh perspective and a different look, and they all sort of came up through the same industry, the rent-to-own industry, so really wanted not just an outside perspective, but a perspective from a different industry altogether. And Michael's background was in different franchise companies,
Sure.
Pizza and fitness and other things, and I think that worked well, where my expertise was in operations,
Sure.
in the rent-to-own business. So I think we were a really good complement for one another.
No, absolutely. And I think that this next question is for you, Michael. I think I'd kind of love to hear a little bit about, when you actually got into the job here, and, you guys weren't offering franchises at the time. I would love to kind of hear about, with the moment when you got here, what did you think was the first thing that you wanted to do, and how do you feel that your process has really evolved over time as you guys have really begun to get more into franchise development? Of course, you guys have really made a lot of big splashes this year.
Sure.
We'd love to kind of just hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So back in 2012, when Cathy hired me, as you mentioned, the brand was a little bit stagnant. There hadn't been much growth, but the underlying business model was great, right? The rent-to-own business model is a tremendous model. We had a financing program at the time. The franchisees were making money, and I couldn't figure out why we weren't growing. So we just got after it, right? And some of the same traditional franchise development means that folks in the industry would do, right? Started working the leads hard, get some more lead generation strategies going, website development, working referrals from franchisees, and we got a lot of momentum. When I started in 2012, we had one large franchisee group in the system. We had a couple mid-size and several smaller franchisees. And we started looking at a strategy, and Cathy and I had honed in on a really large multi-unit strategy, which we convinced the company to do. RentACenter is unique in that we own over 2,000 of the stores that exist. RentACenter has about 2,200 brick and mortar stores. We have a number of franchise stores, but we own 90% of the stores. So to get the multi-unit scale that we wanted, we have a re-franchising strategy where we want to sell existing stores to franchisees, but we want to do it at scale. So we did an early test in 2015, got permission from the board. Cathy pushed hard for that, and our CEO. And we tested out selling 40 existing stores to a franchisee from outside the industry. And that test was very successful. Picked a really great partner after looking at a few, and then decided we're going to go for a mega multi-unit strategy. So today in RentACenter, we are looking for candidates that can do anywhere from 20 to 50 stores at a time. So we're really going after professional franchise groups. The guys or gals who own 100 restaurants already, who own hotels, for example. So we really, after 2015, from learning how to support large multi-unit franchisees, it's different than supporting smaller franchisees. They have different needs. We really started going further in 2018, and we started going after these really big fish, so to speak. And that's been our program ever since, just focusing on the big franchisees.
Absolutely. And I think that, in order for a lot of these emerging and re-emerging brands to really identify with your mission, because obviously you guys are in a very different place than they are, would love to kind of hear both of your opinions really on what kind of personality characteristics you guys look for when you guys are looking to vet out a potential, franchisee, no matter if they're a single store or if they're going to own 100. I think it's really important to kind of have that part down. So just kind of curious as to what you guys really look for in terms of, it could be tied into culture, it could be really tied into anything, but we'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think through some trial and error, I think coachability is probably right up there at the top of the list. Our business is pretty unique. I mean, everyone's business is unique to some extent, but ours is so niche that you really have to follow the system to the letter and not try to build a better mousetrap. And we've seen some folks try to do that. So I think we really look for someone who's not coming in and as we're talking to them saying, well, why don't you do it this way? Why don't you do it this way right off the bat, right? Just someone who feels like they're coachable.
So and to the previous question, how's it changed over time, right? We realized seeing how, if we're going to hand over 40 to 50 stores to a new group, seeing how they manage teams, right? You're not running 50 stores. You're managing people who are managing 50 stores or 40 stores. So getting into their organizations, we go on the ground and visit our prospective franchisees early on. So recent deal, the franchisee owns 75 Dunkin' Donuts. Cathy and I went to their home market, toured a couple stores, met their back office, understand what makes you successful in this brand, which tells us some probability and likelihood that you'll be successful in our brand. For us, people are very, very important. Everyone says that, but ours is a people business. So, what's the tenure of your teams, your managers? How do you compensate them? How do you motivate them? That's an important component of it, not just who has X number of dollars in the bank and a certain net worth. Yeah, you need financial resources, but it might be number 2 or 3 on the list to be successful in our system.
Certainly.
I think interpersonal skills too. I mean, just it's almost the same lens you would look at bringing in a high level employee if you were going to do that in some respects, because you want somebody who's going to have good interpersonal skills, who's going to be able to develop a good relationship with you, because they're going to have a relationship with you for 5, 10, 20 years and with your team. So you want someone who's going to be able to interact and be professional and pleasant, and and be professional when things don't always go the way that you want them to go.
Because it always won't. So it really just depends.
It won't always be perfect.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I would love to kind of hear a little bit more about how you guys are differentiating yourselves from, you guys do have some folks who are in the same space as you guys in the franchise space, and obviously outside as well, but would love to kind of hear about how you guys are differentiating yourselves from a franchise development standpoint, because you may not necessarily be competing just with people in your industry. If you're also competing with folks who are looking for high net worth individuals, just like you guys are. So we'd love to kind of hear how you guys highlight, Rent-A-Center versus all of those things that are kind of chasing after you.
I think we're pretty lucky in that everyone has competition, right? In the franchise. Franchising is a tremendously successful industry, $800 billion plus, depending on how you do the math on it. And there's competition everywhere. The rent-to-own space that we have is about an $8 to $9 billion space. It just isn't that large. Between us and our competitor, Aaron's, we have about half of that, or 60% of that between the two companies. And so in the market, we don't have that much competition, although there's some. I view every large, successful franchisor as somewhat of a competitor who is doing multi-unit and doing refranchising. Refranchising, of course, meaning taking corporate stores and selling them to franchisees. At the scale that we're doing it, I think it's what's unique. So the Rent-A-Center opportunity, I really think, is one of the most unique opportunities that exist in the franchise marketplace today. In that I think there are so many sophisticated multi-unit franchisees. We've all seen them all grow. From the guys in groups that had 20 stores to 50 stores to 1,000 stores. You hear about these big groups out there, and people are competing for those folks. A lot of folks from time to time, franchisors, have refranchising programs. Rent-A-Centers and the ability to diversify their portfolio. Our message to so many of the big franchise investors out there, especially those who are heavily invested in food. Right? The biggest groups happen to be in food, and I love food. I came from food. We're all consumers of food, but some of those investors are a little bit nervous, those franchisees, that maybe they're not diversified enough. So our message is diversify your franchise portfolio. And before they used to think, well, I'm in the burger space, well, I'll diversify into pizza and a little bit into fried chicken. Are you really diversified? I'd say perhaps you're not. So Rent-A-Center franchise is, I think, the ultimate diversification play for those folks out there. So in that regard, we're pretty unique because we can offer 20 to 50 stores in an entire turnkey market. Who else in franchising can say, I'll sell you 20 existing or 50 existing cash flowing stores that are established, they're built out, they have customers, they have a receivables portfolio, they have co-workers, managers, district managers, vehicles.
They just got to be able to run it better.
As turnkey as it gets. So from that regard, I think we're pretty differentiated there.
Awesome. I love that. So diving a little bit further, because obviously I know that we went through the franchise sales aspect of this. I would love to kind of hear how you guys are differentiating yourselves to consumers as well, because I think it's obviously important to highlight that. What advice do you guys have for folks who are, really starting out in terms of strategies that you guys have really employed to help differentiate yourselves from a consumer standpoint?
Yeah, so in our space, which as Michael pointed out is a relatively small area, which is the rent-to-own, cash-constrained consumer space, we really are the only franchise opportunity of any scale with the type of operations and support that we have that offers consumers low weekly payments. So it's a cash-constrained consumer who may not have the money to go out and buy something. Some of our competitors out there run more of a monthly payment model. We found that the differentiating factor for us, and then there are a lot of smaller independent rent-to-own dealers that do the same. That weekly payment makes it very affordable, very manageable for a consumer to acquire household goods, furniture, appliances, electronics, the things that you would get at Rent-A-Center in the rent-to-own business. So that's a big one, that we offer weekly payments, and
Nice.
and others offer it, but that's really not their focus.
So how did you guys come up with that idea? What was your thought process in terms of getting there? Because I know that obviously I have noticed that is a differentiating point of what you guys have done. But what thought process did you guys go through to get there? Because I think that what'll help people is to kind of understand how you guys think about it and how you guys kind of got to that point.
Yeah, it's interesting. The weekly payment thought started with RentACenter in the earliest years back in the 1960s with really the founder of the company, this gentleman Ernie Talley. He was in the appliance business and recognized that there was a market for consumers that couldn't come in and buy them outright, and just started giving people, essentially terms to pay weekly, and then the option to give it back, which is what really makes the rent-own business unique. You're not acquiring it; you're renting or leasing to own it, and you acquire ownership by making all the payments. But until you do, you can give it back. And that aspect of it makes it very attractive and makes it possible in a business where you don't do a credit check on a consumer. Sure. So you can, if you don't want to make the payment or you're not able to make the payment, you can just give the product back. But that is the original model that he was running back when RentACenter started, and it's really never changed for us since. A lot of folks have tried a monthly model or done different things, and we've dipped a toe in it here and there, but we've never found that it's been as successful as really focusing on that weekly customer.
Cool. Okay, great. Let's take a dive into the numbers here, guys. We'd love to kind of hear a little bit about how you guys think of unit economics and how you guys measure it and how you guys feel that by measuring and how has your process really changed? Because I think it's important for the folks listening to kind of understand how a large company like you guys really thinks about unit economics and how important it is and things of that nature.
I can probably start with, when you're publicly traded and you have a board of directors and you have Wall Street investors, it's all about the unit economics, right? Not much else matters at the end of the day if you're not making money. So we're pretty fortunate that the business model is one that is a cash flowing model. We have, since we own 2,200 of the stores, we keep pretty robust P&Ls and are always looking at our metrics. So our ability to share with our franchisees, some franchisors are in a tougher spot in talking about performance because maybe the franchisees own all the stores. We own 90% of the stores ourselves, so we can speak with some level of authority that we know how the business is running and should run. Doesn't mean the franchisees can't make tweaks to the model a little bit, and they should, and they might be able to run expenses a little bit better. But we have the ability to show them here's our P&Ls and how we do business. We share it in our FDD. We try to give them advice with our franchise business consultants on how corporate trends are and compare and contrast those and see how we're all stacking up, right? So we're learning in one part of the country, and what learnings can we share with you in another part of the country?
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that we've really evolved towards now is seeing things more than ever before from the franchisee's perspective when you look at unit economics. So we're refranchising, we're selling our existing stores to franchisees, and I think we dig deeper now than we ever have to make sure that we understand how the franchisee's expense model is going to work, and really understand it and look at it from their perspective, and where we're not just selling stores. We're really sitting down and saying, okay, well, we know you're going to have a royalty expense that's not on our P&L. How does that impact your return? And we look at our return, and we really try to meet in the middle and try and figure out, there's a spot where it's a decent return for the franchisee and still a decent return for the corporation. But I think we're getting really good at seeing it and understanding it and even explaining it from the franchisee's perspective.
Absolutely.
And we can even continue to get better, right? We're a mature company, been around for decades, a large company, but we even learn. I learned things at the Emerging Franchisors Conference, for example. Younger brands, how they're working from a common chart of account with their franchisees and all speaking from the same sheet of music. A lot of franchisors, it's easy just to be thinking about customers and sales because most franchisors are trying to help their franchisees with customers and sales, but that's not all that goes on the P&L. As we know, expenses, expense management, vendors, right? We're starting to get better at articulating how we do it to the franchisees, and I think we're all getting stronger because of it.
Absolutely. So I know that you guys obviously are getting franchise leads in a very different way than everybody else, considering your strategy. But what I'd love to do is to kind of get really both of your opinions as to where if you feel that digital is important in that regard, and if you guys have employed that strategy, and if you think that it's important for brands that are emerging and re-emerging to get into that, and if you do, why, and if you don't, why? I suppose is the question.
Yeah, so I'll let you speak to the digital. Most of our leads in the early days and even now are from word of mouth, which is great. I mean, we've done a fair bit of advertising out there, and I'll let Michael speak to that. But I think if you're taking care of your franchisees, you have a good relationship with them, and they'll naturally tell other people. So where we were focused in our early days on other operators in our business area, and they were telling each other and other people in that arena, and the word of mouth got out to the other single store operators. Now we're having the same experience in the larger multi-unit franchise community, because they're having a good experience and they're telling other people. But we've done also a fair bit of marketing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, our investment's pretty unique, right? So you look at emerging franchisors, I'm selling a $5 to $50 million deal, right? So as you can imagine, the lead generation strategy for that, somebody who's going to buy 50 stores is much different than somebody who's going to try to buy one gym.
Sure.
So we've done in the past, I've done, portal lead generation, I've done trade shows, I've used brokers in the past, PR in the past. Do believe heavily in digital. Right now our focus, our pool of prospective franchisees is only a few hundred in America, I think, who can do a $5 to $50 million deal and do it in franchising. So we're networking with bankers, with lawyers, referrals from our big franchisees. Shouldn't be a surprise that big high net worth franchisees who own 100 restaurants have friends and talk to each other, have friends who also own 100 unit restaurant and hotel chains. So validation is very, very important, keeping those big franchisees happy. But we believe heavily in PR. I use Fishman PR. There's a lot of good firms out there. And a lot of the PR that we do, we like to make that known in a digital fashion, right? What the big franchisees do, they all watch each other. So, digital is a very important component of our strategy.
Absolutely. I mean, that makes sense. So, going off of this franchise sales theme that we're on right now, obviously the process that you guys have and the way that you guys go about your discovery days and things of that nature are very different than what a typical emerging brand would kind of come across. But there is one thing that I think that you guys definitely would be able to have a lot of similarities with, which is how to use your FDD as a sales tool. And we'd love to kind of dig into that a bit, because I think that everybody should be doing it. But I'm just kind of curious as to how you guys are, just so some folks can really learn how to do it, because I think that people look at this document as something evil that they don't really understand, and they just pay a lawyer to figure out. But I think it'd be cool to kind of hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, let's take a shot. So, and brag about my boss. An FDD can be used as a sales tool, right? Ours, I certainly think is. An FDD for a prospect can be intimidating, right? It's a huge document, hundreds of pages with all this legalese. It's required by the FTC, but there's some great nuggets in there. Item 2, business experience, for example. I have the benefit of turning to item 2 and say, look who's running this business. My boss here, Cathy Skula, started in a store right out of college and worked her way up to a store manager, district manager, regional director, running hundreds of stores, and now is the head executive of a whole franchising group. Been in every single role in the company. Our CEO, been with us for 20 years. We have deep business experience in your item 2. So if you have good people, good founders, good executives, that can certainly be a sales tool. The biggest sales tool is the item 19, the financial performance representation for those brands that have it. The back and forth in the industry, at every conference, do you have an item 19? Should you have it? Of course, I'm on the side of absolutely you should have an item 19. Ours is robust. I think we have one of the most robust item 19s historically in the country, in that we have 2,000 stores that we own. How might you do in a rent center? Let's turn to the tape here and look at 2,000 stores worth of data, P&Ls. So we go right to that at 19 when we're talking with prospective franchisees. And refranchising, I've got a great benefit, is that we're actually showing them the existing P&Ls of the 50 stores that I'm going to send them. So it's a little bit easier, but it certainly starts with the item 19 and it all comes from the FDD.
Yeah, and for those folks who are listening who are wondering, well, that's well and good, but what is an item 19? Best way to explain it is it's really airing the good and the bad of the dirty laundry of every franchisor, and I think it's a good thing for people to really show their true colors and be authentic. And that's really what the Item 19 is all about. For every single person that you guys will hear that we have on here, the Item 19 is going to be mentioned over and over and over again. So always helpful to know exactly what it is. Now, switching gears a little bit to kind of learn a little bit more about, how you, really the operational side. I think, Cathy, I think you will definitely be able to fill this part in quite well, is really to kind of discuss how you guys are interacting with your franchisees, since it is such a unique model. It would really be helpful what strategies you have and what you guys have done that you think has really worked for you that you think would work for other people too.
Yeah, so on the day-to-day, our franchise business consultants are the eyes and ears out there. They're sharing best practices. 90% of our stores being owned by the corporation. I mean, we're living it along with the franchisees every day. We're gathering their best practices, but we're sharing ours, and it's really a back and forth. We have the Franchise Advisory Council that we bring in several times a year to meet in person, but we're talking to probably every couple of weeks. We're interacting with them on marketing strategies, on talking to them about upcoming promotions, getting their feedback, what they think about different prices that we're putting out there in the market. So we're really we're out there supporting them from an operations standpoint, but at the same time gathering information about what products we think we should try and carry next, and again, their best practices. So we interact with them on the front lines through the franchise business consultants, but then we have all of our functional departments in this large 800-person building here, interacting with the franchisees at some level. We have our purchasing department. Our head of purchasing gets their feedback on what kind of products we're carrying and supports them in when they're having trouble with orders that they place, or vendor minimums or availability, those types of things, and the marketing team. So we actually have a lot of different people interacting with the franchisees throughout the organization, but really it all funnels through the business consultants and our director of operations, so that they sort of have one contact point. When they have a problem, they don't necessarily have to navigate an 800-person building, where they can zero in on one area and then they can farm it out from there.
100%. And so for the folks listening, I guess how important do you feel that your franchise advisory council is? I mean, you really filled in, you really got deep into that, and I appreciate that. And how early did you guys actually employ that strategy?
Absolutely critical. I could not imagine if we didn't have one. I mean, they are so helpful. They're open, candid. Their feedback is it's absolutely essential. I can't stress enough. I think obviously you have to get to a certain size before you need that. I don't know, is that 50 units? Is that 75 units? Somewhere in there, but I'd say by 100, you should have that mechanism to be able to get the feedback from the franchisee community, because your franchisees will say stuff to each other and to the franchisees that are sort of the leaders in the group that they won't necessarily feel comfortable telling you, or they don't have time to bubble up. But we've had we had a franchise advisory council in place before I even took over, when we were still a small Color Time 200 unit chain, and it's just, again, it's absolutely essential, getting their feedback and working through them with trying to solve problems, and help message sometimes when things are good or bad that we're trying to communicate to the franchisees. So I think it's crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears a little bit into culture, would love to kind of talk a little bit about your culture. Obviously, it must be an incredibly challenging thing for you guys to navigate culture when there's so many people in the corporate office, and there's a lot of people in the field at the various different stores you guys have. So I would love for the folks listening just to kind of understand how you guys went about determining what your culture should look like, and what you felt was really important to include in order to really, ingrain it in your employees, no matter where they are.
Yeah. So first off, a culture has to be something that you live. It can't be, you see companies with a mission statement things all over, in their stores or in their corporate offices, and it can't just be words on a page. It has to be shown through actions at every level, starting with the top of the organization. So, as an example, we have a culture where the customer comes first, at RentACenter. So we talk about that pillar with several pillars that we feel like we really stand for. That's the number one pillar, is the customer. The consumer comes first. And throughout this building, you'll see chairs covered, one chair in each conference room covered in blue on the back of it. And that's to represent that the customer is in the room. So when people are meeting on different subjects, the idea is that someone is going to look around and say, how would the customer think about that? Is that really the best thing for the customer, for the consumer? But that's something that is now ingrained in our culture, and we have signs all around the building, and that's great. They're not just words on the page. We do have chairs, and it actually gets a little awkward sometimes when we're in a conference room because you're not supposed to sit in the customer's chair. So when you run out of chairs, you have to go into a different conference room and pull in a chair.
I found the blue chair.
And there's the blue chair right there. Yeah. So don't sit in the blue chair because then you'd be sitting on the customer. But it is. Everyone is aware of it, so it's not just this thing that's going on in the back or this sign that's sitting somewhere in a room.
Nice. Actually living the culture in real life is important. I agree with that. So that's awesome. And for those folks who are listening and may not necessarily be able to see, we are sitting in the blue chair. So we apologize to folks at RentACenter for that one. But kind of completely switching gears again here into something that I am always curious about, especially because you guys are definitely one of the larger franchisors in the space. I think it's really interesting to hear how you guys deal with, threats to your business model and threats from a legal standpoint as well. Obviously, there are a lot of things going on Capitol Hill right now. So we'd love to kind of hear your guys' opinions on, how you guys are dealing with that, and if you guys, in things of that nature, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's pretty unique when you're publicly traded. Maybe it's a benefit, but maybe it's sometimes not. There are analysts and Wall Street analysts who get paid to point out the risks in our business model to the investment community. Maybe we're pretty fortunate in that we're in a model in a business sector that got too much risk. Has been characterized as Amazon resistant, which is pretty interesting, which is a good thing. But risks are pointed out. On the franchise front, legislatively, we lean on good counsel. We use Fisher Zucker out there. There are a lot of good franchise law firms. We're big fans of Fisher Zucker. They have lots of franchise clients, and they have their kind of hands in the ability to talk to a lot of different franchisors. So we learn things that they've learned during their time there. So you get good advice. You feel pretty good about the horizon, but there's certainly some things out there.
Sure. Yeah, I would say investing early in good franchise legal advice is critical. If you make missteps early on, those agreements last a long time, and the pain could be felt for a long time. So where it might be tempting to shortcut that expense, that's one that I definitely wouldn't shortchange.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And so now to close out, I'd love to kind of hear, looking back, when you guys were on the smaller side, or when you guys started in the business, and you guys weren't even franchising at that point. What do you guys wish that you did differently that hopefully an emerging brand rising up won't do, because you guys are wearing them right now?
Let's see here.
I think if we're being honest, I think we probably would say, of course you want us to be honest.
Sure.
I think everyone would admit to being a little overzealous in some of the people we chose early on. I think if we had a few do-overs, we would probably have been a little bit more measured in some of the folks we've brought on, where I think gut told us it's a little iffy, and we sort of found out the hard way that it probably wasn't the right decision. So I think we would have been, maybe a little more selective in a few cases.
Yeah, indeed. We offered a financing. Right? We were financing franchisees early on. We started, and that was an interesting program. That wasn't a mistake. It worked out really, really well for the franchisees. And we took a little bit of risk here. We stopped that program. And that's an opportunity for some people to consider doing, but it was certainly beneficial for those folks. But it's being mindful of your strategy, thinking of a strategy, thinking, good structures like chess and not checkers. You got to think several steps ahead. I think we made quite a few good decisions that we're still benefiting from today.
Yeah, and that's our beginnings with the franchise subsidiary. Of course, we weren't there at the very beginning, but Michael and I have been fortunate enough to spend enough time around folks that are founders and emerging franchisors by attending the Emerging Franchisor Conference, and I've heard several sort of talk about the same thing that I just mentioned, that that you have to be careful about being too aggressive with growth early on. So I think that's a really great venue for someone who's new to franchising to go and learn from other people's mistakes, because people are very open and then they talk about things like that. So I would encourage people to get as much advice from people that are in the same situation as you as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I just wanted to thank Cathy and Michael for letting us join them in their beautiful office today. Folks, feel free to subscribe on Modern Business in order to really hear a little bit more of similar podcasts like this. In addition, please visit www.franchisors.com for you guys to learn a little bit more about how to navigate this crazy world that we call franchising, and to learn from other important folks like Cathy and Michael to kind of determine how to best do your job. Anyways, thanks you guys so much again for listening, and talk to you guys soon.